Welcome to the Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs podcast, a place for podcasters to learn what's actually working in the world of podcasting and how to use their podcast to generate consistent leads in their business. I'm your host, Jenny, and I'm so excited you're here.
Hey, Savvies, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. In today's quick episode, we're addressing self-sabotage and how you can prevent that during the podcast launch process. So let's get into it. When you launch a podcast, you will have to overcome a lot of obstacles when it comes to your mindset. I'm sure thoughts like, is my message really valuable enough to start a podcast? I hate my voice. What if no one ever listens? And so many more different negative thoughts have popped into your head throughout this whole process of starting your podcast. And I'm here to tell you that's totally and completely normal, even though it sucks. We all have some or all of these thoughts in our head at some point during the launch process because your mind is trying to protect you from doing something that may be uncomfortable for you. But please don't let these intrusive thoughts stop you from getting your message out there and in front of people who need to hear it from you. My best advice here is to try and block out all the negative self-talk and focus on creating great content that your audience will love. I know it's not as easy as it sounds, but your people truly need to hear your message. Trust me. So just do your best to really put your blinders on and focus on the task at hand so that you can create a podcast that has raving fans who are obsessed with everything that you have to offer. And they constantly tell their friends about you and your podcast and offerings in general. I did want to share some quick tips to make this process a little bit easier on you. Definitely not going to be easy by any means, but slightly easier. So tip number one is try not to get inside your own head too much. I know this is easier said than done, but like I just said, put your blinders on and try to really focus on the podcast content and what you're trying to create and what you're trying to build versus thinking about little things like, oh, I hate my voice, or, oh, like I don't have a super fancy recording setup and all that stuff. Just focus on the value of your content and what you're going to be delivering, not anything else. Tip number two, practice, and practice some more. So podcasting is definitely, obviously, very tough on your mindset when you're first getting started because a lot of people don't like their voice or they don't sound confident when they're speaking because they're just not used to it. So just make sure to practice recording solo episodes, practice recording. Even if you can do some practice like interviews with someone, that would be really helpful as well before you actually do a real interview. Just practice as much as you can, and that'll make you feel more and more confident over time with your podcast. Number three, just know that it gets easier the longer that you do it. So obviously, when we're first starting anything, it's not familiar to us, so it feels hard. But as long as you keep pushing forward and putting out your content on a consistent basis, it's going to get easier. You're going to feel better every single time you hit the record button. I know I've said this several times, but if you go back to episode 1 of my podcast, I sound way less confident than I do now at episode 227. So I think it's important to just think you're not going to be perfect from the get-go, and that's totally okay. You definitely want to have room to grow because if you're 227 episodes in your podcast and you still sound the exact same, then you haven't made any progress. You haven't grown any. And obviously, like, you want to grow. So that's that. Tip number 4, acknowledge that your show isn't going to blow up overnight. I know a lot of people go into podcasting and they don't really know what to expect, but I will say you're likely not going to blow up overnight. And that's actually a good thing. You want to be able to grow slowly, continuously grow, but not super fast because that can be really overwhelming. So stick with it. Even if you don't feel like you're growing fast enough, you're liking, stick with it. It can take up to a year really to start seeing like really consistent growth. So just stick with it, be consistent, and you will really start to see that growth over time. And don't be upset if your show doesn't grow super fast, because podcasting is a slow burn. It's not an instantaneous, like viral thing. You can get on social media. So just have realistic expectations, essentially. And tip number 5, make sure you are batching your episodes. The easiest way to get burnt out is by trying to record a new episode each and every week. So have some in the can ready to go for when life gets busy and you aren't going to be able to record that week. Then you already have some recorded and you can just pull from those instead of skipping week after week potentially because you're so busy or someone got sick or your whole family got sick or whatever those things that happen in life, because life definitely happens. Just make sure you have some in the can. I like to keep at least 3 to 6 ready to go in the instance that something's going to happen. Obviously I have other batched episodes as well, but then I have my backup batch as well. So it really helps keep everything consistent even when times are crazy. So yeah, those are my 5 quick tips for you. Now I want to know, what's the biggest mindset block that you've been facing during your podcast launch process? Or if you're listening to this and already launched, let me know what was the biggest mindset block you encountered. So you can DM me at jenny.sunnison on Instagram and let me know so we can work through it together. I'd love to help you with that. So yeah, that's it for today's episode. If you want to check out the show notes, you can go to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com and I will see you in the next episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher and leave a review. You can find us at savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com and on Facebook at Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs and Instagram at Savvy Podcasting. Make sure to join our free Facebook community for podcasters by going to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/community and join in on the exclusive community just for Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs listeners. I'll see you there.